They are not reading. Tell me your name again.
Peter.
Peter.
Yeah, long time ago, 3 years ago. Meantime, Shadavan is gone. You take him now.
So it's been long since you've been here. It's good to see you back. I don't think so. I think I'm at 156.
An ocean of electric energy, formlessly formed in strange wave particles, constructing by their dance this solid scheme. Its mightiness in the action shut the rest, thus has been made this real impossible world an obvious miracle or convincing show. Good morning, everyone. Before we begin, maybe I'll just give a small announcement that on Tuesday, the 7th, I'll be giving a presentation here at 4 o'clock. I'm doing a series of talks monthly on the fundamentals of Sri Aurobindo's philosophy in Savitri. So this is the second in the series, and it is on involution and evolution. So the talks, they give an introduction to the philosophical concept in Sri Aurobindo's prose writings in the beginning, and then I shift to Savitri and show how it's expressed in this more mantric language of Savitri. So I select a number of different passages and just give a very brief commentary on them to bring out the main points. So that's at 4 o'clock on Tuesday here. So now we're reading in Book 2, the Book of the Traveler of the Worlds. We're following King Aswapati's journey through the inner planes of consciousness. He's begun with the lower planes. The planes, first he began with the kingdom of subtle matter, a world very close to our physical world, but a subtle physical world. And now we've moved up the ladder, the hierarchy of worlds, to the kingdoms of life, beginning with the kingdoms of the little life, the lower levels of the vital plane. And we had one canto on that, and now we're in the next canto, the Godheads of the little life. So he's describing in this canto the beings that live in this realm and how they also influence us. But right now, within this canto, we're reading through a section that describes in some detail the evolution of consciousness. So last time we were reading, he's given a detailed look at how matter was formed out of the inconscient void. And we've come to the point now where the beginnings of life are emerging in matter. And so he will describe this emergence more fully as it arises and comes up, let's say, in the course of evolution towards the level of the human being. So we're on page 156 at line 204. I'll just read as a kind of introduction just the last section, about 8 or 10 lines, that describe the beginnings of this emergence of life. Then stirred the spirit's mute, immobile sleep. The force concealed broke dumbly, slowly out. A dream of living woke in matter's heart. A will to live moved the inconscience dust. A freak of living startled vacant time. Ephemeral in a blank eternity, infinitesimal in a dead infinite. A subtler breath quickened dead matter's forms. The world's set rhythm changed to a conscious cry. A serpent power twinned the insensible force. Islands of living dotted lifeless space, and germs of living formed in formless air. So we'll begin now with page or line 204. Would you like to read?
A life was born that followed matter's law, ignorant of the motives of its steps, ever inconscient yet forever the same. It repeated the paradox that gave it birth. Its restless and unstable stabilities recurred incessantly in the follow of time and purposeful moments in unthinking forms reiterate the havings of an impersonal will, waking and sleep lay locked in mutual forms, helpless and distant came pleasure and pain, trembling with the first faint thrills of a world soul.
Thank you. So at first, life still follows matter's law. Matter's law is this unconscious circling of force over and over again, repeating, circling round, creating the atoms, creating the physical universe, the orbits of the planets, the movements of the stars. They just follow this repeating pattern. So life too follows that, ignorant of the motives of its steps, ever inconstant, yet forever the same. Always moving, but always not really changing its character or nature. It repeated the paradox that gave it birth. Its restless and unstable stabilities. Paradoxical, but that is very much the nature of physical force and also the early forms of life. Recurred incessantly in the flow of time, ceaselessly repeating the same movements, the same pattern over and over.
I think it's interesting that he uses the word paradox
Mm.
and then gives us many paradoxes in the same.
Right, right. Purposeful movements in unthinking forms. Here too, the forms are not really conscious, or certainly self-conscious as of yet. These very minute organisms that may just be arising. But they have these purposeful movements. They may be seeking for food or air or light or something, nourishment, but they're not aware of what they're doing. They're just automatically doing these things. So that betrays the heavings of an imprisoned will. It suggests there is something occult within them that's driving them towards these purposeful movements of which they themselves are not conscious. Heaving. Heaving is a kind of a movement of up and down. Like if we breathe heavily, we can say that there's this heaving of breath. It's this expansion and retraction. Helpless and indistinct came pleasure and pain, trembling with the first faint thrills of a world soul. So this sensation is arising in these life forms, which begins with this sensation of pleasure and pain. But it's the beginnings of something, the first stirrings of a world soul.
Then at the same year, it is the beginning first of the world soul, not an individual soul.
Yes. Yeah, still not an individualized conscious being, but there's this universal force working within these simple organisms.
Can you talk a little bit about more, or will you explain that the world soul, or say, came first?
Yeah, at first, there is a being within all of nature that is beginning to awaken. It's not individualized yet. It's something, a universal being is waking up within nature. Eventually, it will formulate itself more clearly and distinctly in the individuals, which will then each be somewhat different than the next. But now these germs or these simple organisms, they're all pretty much alike. There's not much difference between them. They have no sense of individuality yet. So that's how it begins. Dhanalakshmi?
A strength of life that could not cry or move, yet broke into beauty, signing some deep delight, an inarticulate sensibility, throbs of the heart of an unknowing world, ran through its somnolent torpor and there stirred. A vague, uncertain thrill, a wandering beat, a dim unclosing as of secret eyes. Infant self-feeling grew and birth was born. A godhead woke but lay with dreaming limbs. Her house refused to open its sealed doors. Insentient to our eyes that only see the form, the act and not the imprisoned God. Life hid in her pulse, a cult of growth and power, a consciousness with mute, stifled beats of sense, a mind suppressed, that knew not yet of thought, an inert spirit that could only be.
Thank you. Sri Aurobindo seems to be beginning to describe the plant world in this passage. A strength of life that could not cry or move, yet broke into beauty, signing some deep delight. An inarticulate sensibility. It can't voice its experience of sensation as yet, can't really express itself except through beauty, through the beauty of the form, the harmony of its form. That is the only way, the only tools it has really to express itself at this point.
As I see this word so close also, that there is some deep delight, that seems going together. Why is the word so thirsty?
Yeah, it's the delight of existence is there within all things. When the Supreme comes and involves itself in matter, what comes down is this infinite existence, consciousness, and delight of existence, just the delight of being. So that comes into matter and is there inherent within it, and then slowly emerges. And here again we get this sense of this world soul or universal being when he says, "A Godhead woke, but lay with dreaming limbs. Her house, the outer form of nature, refused to open its sealed doors." And then, insentient to our eyes that only see the form, the act, and not the imprisoned God, suggests there is a being, this Godhead within the form. We can't perceive it because we're tied to the outer form and can't communicate with that inner presence or inner being that is within it. Life hid in her pulse occult of growth and power. Beats of sense is all as far as the consciousness is able to express itself. The mind was suppressed. an inert spirit that could only be, could exist, but that was about as far as it could express itself. She. Yeah, nature, life, he generally refers to that as the feminine principle. The soul, he generally refers to as the masculine principle. Sohini.
At first, she raised no voice, no motion dared. Charged with world power, instinct with living force, only she clung with her roots to the safe earth, thrilled dumbly to the shocks of ray and breeze, and put out tendril fingers of desire. The strength in her yearning for sun and light felt not the embrace that made her breathe and live. Absorbed, she dreamed content with beauty and hue. At last, the charmed immensity looked forth. Astir, vibrant, hungering, she groped for mind. Then slowly sense quivered and thought peered on. She forced the reluctant mold to grow aware.
Thank you. Here again, he is describing this plant kingdom a little bit more explicitly here. She clung with her roots to the safe earth, thrilled dumbly, that is, without speaking, without sound, to the shocks of ray and breeze, and put out tendril fingers of desire. Tendrils are these kind of thread-like structures of plants that, for example, may hang down from the banyan tree, kind of seeking earth to root itself. The strength in her, yearning for sun and light, felt not the embrace that made her breathe and live. Absorbed, she dreamed content with beauty and hue. Still content with expressing itself through beauty and color, form. And then, at last, the charmed immensity looked forth, a stir, that is stirring, moving, vibrant, hungering. She groped for mind. Then slowly sense quivered and thought peered out. She forced the reluctant mole to grow aware. You know, even in plants or certain plants, I think there is this beginning of consciousness. When I was a kid, I was struck by these fly trapper plants, these kind of flowers that will catch flies that are coming. Already, you know, there is this kind of borderline between plant and animal.
There's also long research work, I think it was in the 60s or so, that they had plants in the room, and one came in one room, they played Bach Beethoven music, and they all reacted like this. And then in another room, they came also always one in and cut the piece, and then they did like this. So there is a reaction, and it is measured.
Yeah, perhaps we're not really sensitive and aware of how conscious, in a way, plants may be, that they react to their environments, to the vibrations around them.
And when I was once in Canada, I got to know that native people there, before they cut the trees, they pray to the trees, then they will cut loose everything, and then they could do it because the spirit could go out. And then it was safe to use the material.
Yeah, I think that's a common practice in many of the indigenous tribes around the world, that they are more in tune with the consciousness of the plant life around them.
Grandmother used to say, I have to speak to them, and they grow, and grow, they did, you know. She was a very simple woman. She always talked to them.
It's a nice kind of simplicity. I think it's interesting ambiguity in the line 242, the word gold. Like the black stuff, it's like a fungus, it's gold. I think this is also what's talking about, guys. You know, when you look, so the black fungus kind of thing, or to be a shape, when you're molding clay or something like that. And I'm not sure which is intended, it might be intentional idea. So I'm really life form.
Yeah. It suggests to me that outer the form, but as you say, it could be this life form of mold as well. Eva?
The magic was chiseled of a conscious form. Its trance vibrations rhythm a quick response, and luminous stirrings prompt brain and nerve. A walk in matter spirit's identity. And in body lit the miracle of the heart's love and the soul's witness gaze. Impelled by an unseen will, there could break out fragments of some vast impulse to become, and vivid glimpses of a secret self, and the doubtful seeds and force of shapes to be. A walk from the inconscient swan of things. An animal creation crept and ran, and flew and called between the earth and sky, hunted by death but hoping still to live, and glad to breathe if only for a while.
Thank you. Whereas in the earliest forms of life, there was more this universal being or Godhead that was awake within it, but unable to express itself. Here, in the beginnings here of the manifestation of the animal life, we see the beginnings of a conscious being, an individualized being. So now the magic was chiseled of a conscious form. Its tranced vibrations rhythmed a quick response, and luminous stirrings prompted brain and nerve, awoke in matter spirit's identity. It suggests it's becoming self-conscious. And in a body lit the miracle of the heart's love and the soul's witness gaze. Well, at least the ability to reflect upon oneself as that, but and
with the creation of animal, the evolution of the mind. But before that, because in animals, it's more of an intelligence of the species, like the ants, they're more divine because they don't have a perversion of the mental and the ego individuality, but it's still like, even with the animals, with all higher animals also, they have a conscious arrangement among them, a collective individuality which is more like an intelligent to the species. I think it's only with the human beings that a conscious self-aware individuality begins, even if it's primitive humans.
that may be. I would tend to disagree, and I think my dog might disagree that he doesn't have any individuality.
I'm saying the capacity of self-perception or being aware that you are human, individuality is only from primitive humans.
Certainly humans are unique in that ability to look upon themselves as kind of objectively. But there is, I think, this kind of a subjective awareness that's there within animals. And one can also sense a kind of individuality in many animals. They don't all behave the same or respond the same to things. Some dogs will bite and attack at the slightest provocation. Others are very laid back and, very susceptible or friendly, or they can have quite a unique character.
And it's a gradual development.
Yeah.
Easily start already in animals.
So he's suggesting that there are fragments of some vast impulse to become, to perhaps develop, and vivid glimpses of a secret self. And the doubtful seeds and force of shapes to be. So we'll continue, B.
Then man was molded from the original brute. A thinking mind had come to lift life's moods. The keen-edged tool of nature, mixed and vague, an intelligence, half witness, half machine. This seeming driver of her wheel of works, missioned to motive and record her drift and fix its law on her inconstant powers, this master spring of a delicate enginery aspired to enlighten its user and refine, lifting to a vision of the indwelling power, the absorbed mechanic's crude initiative. He raised his eyes. Heaven light mirrored a face.
Thank you. So we have the beginnings of the human being, the keen-edged tool of a nature mixed and vague, an intelligence half witness, half machine. Yeah, well, it could mean from the animal, or it could mean from the very first human beings, from the Neanderthals, or from the very earliest forms of humanity. It could be either, but from that base, so a thinking mind has come, lifting life's moods. Becomes conscious of its feelings, its sensations. This line particularly, I think this intelligence, half witness, half machine, is very descriptive also of us to some extent. Sometimes we're largely machine and sometimes more witness and able to stand back and observe the machine. This seeming driver of her wheel of works. We seem to be instigating our actions, choosing what we're going to do, what we're going to think or feel, but actually not completely. It's only kind of a seeming. It feels that way to us, but still we're largely driven by nature, as the lower forms of life are. We're missioned to motive, to have motivations, to guide our behavior, and record her drift, record the movements of nature within us. Sometimes we can only observe and record what's happening, what nature is doing within us, rather than being the sole driver of that. And fix its law on her inconstant powers. The mind begins to regulate the actions of the being, the movements, the sensations and feelings. It begins to put some control, some rhythm to it. And again, here's another beautiful image, this master spring of a delicate enginery. When we observe the minuteness and complexity of the human brain or the human organism, we see what a delicate enginery it is. But in that complexity, then this conscious being is taking form, which is able to begin to turn on it, observe it, and begin to control that engine. Aspire to enlighten its user and refine, lifting to a vision of the indwelling power, the absorbed mechanics, crude initiative. He raised his eyes, heaven light mirrored a face. The conscious being within begins to turn within and look for its origin, for its source, to the indwelling power within. He raised his eyes towards the source of all of this existence and our own existence.
Going back to line 258 for a second, he uses the word mold as a verb here. Yeah, we're including the design into shape. But I still think there was an ambiguity.
Yeah.
Then I really like the alliteration. Wheel of words, mission to motive. So you can pair of literature phrases right back.
Right. Sudanya? These steps in the evolution?
One step we are rising consciousness slowly, but no new form appears. The more consciousness. How that it is not able to contain the consciousness or something like some lines is there.
Yeah, he's not going into all of the nuances of how this is occurring here. He's more describing the steps that are being taken and not so much the occult processes that are behind it. But we get a sense of it in that there is this complexity of forms developing, which is at least enabling the higher forms of consciousness to emerge. So they're happening in lockstep, they're happening together. But elsewhere he will describe how there is this kind of yearning or movement within the form that is seeking expression or fuller manifestation, and then also that calling down some force from above that enters into the life form, into the body, and enables that forward step to be taken, especially, for example, for life to emerge in the inert matter, or for mind to emerge within the subconscious life, that it calls down something from the higher planes. So above this plane of life, which we're exploring now, there are mental planes of consciousness, which he will pursue later. But from this life plane, something is yearning and calling for greater expression, and it calls down that mind into it. And then that decisive step is taken to the development of the human being. But these two developments, that development of consciousness and the development of the outer form, are both taking place simultaneously, and one helping the other.
The mind, the mental being, the mind descended on earth, it took at least 1 million years for the earth to become receptive and manifest that mind on earth. And so, because somebody had asked a question, now the supramental has come down, so when will the supramental rays be? And she said it took at least 1 million years for even after the descent of mind to even have a human being with the mind manifest on earth, but now it would go much faster. So it's a very slow process because the earth is very unreceptive and unconscious.
My question is not this. My question, suppose the monkey, how much consciousness developed, but we have not seen. From monkey, one man is born. So man is different from that monkey. So monkey growing consciousness higher and higher. We thought in science, but we never seen it in proof. One monkey give a birth of a human being. So how this form suddenly changed with the consciousness? That is my question. That one line is there, I am not much clear. 243. The same thing.
Read.
Then so many cells we got thought thereof, she forced the reluctant mold to grow out. The magic was chiseled for a conscious form.
Curious space. So I think something there.
It sounds vibrational rhythm a quick response.
So something chiseled. I don't know, that is not clear to me.
I don't know that I can
Okay.
say much more than what I've said.
Thank you. So I read.
Amazed at the works wrought in her mystic sleep, she looked upon the world that she had made. Wondering now sees the great automation, she paused to understand herself and aim. Wondering, she learned to act by conscious rule. A vision measure guided her rhythmic steps. Thought border her instincts with a frame of will, and lit with the idea her blinded urge. On her mass of impulse, her reflex acts on the inconscient boost or guided drift and mystery of unthinking, accurate steps. She struck the spacious image of a self, the living idol of disfigured spirit. On matter's act, she imposed a pattern law. She made a thinking body from a chemic cell and molded a being out of a driving force.
Thank you. It's an interesting passage. He seems to go back, in a sense, to that Godhead within, that slowly emerging or waking up within the living being. So this being within life or matter is becoming conscious in the human being. We think ourselves, individualized and separate in a way from nature, but here he's describing as if nature is waking up within us and becoming conscious through us, through our individualities. And now, amazed at the works wrought in her mystic sleep, becoming conscious, this nature within, or this being within, is amazed at what she can now see and observe around her. She's becoming conscious. She looked upon the world that she had made, wondering, now sees the great automaton. She paused to understand herself and aim. Pondering, she learned to act by conscious rule. A vision measure guided her rhythmic steps. This is nature within us, operating within us. Thought bordered her instincts with a frame of will and lit with the idea her blinded urge.
And the automaton is nature.
Yeah, it's the automatic movements of nature as if it were a machine. Before it was unconscious and just acting like this automaton, just acting automatically, but now it's becoming conscious and able to observe this happening. That's what I'm saying, that this nature awakening within us and becoming conscious becomes quite amazed at this world that is around and she's becoming conscious of the things. Whereas before she was just acting automatically in the plants and the animals. She wasn't able to reflect upon it, wonder about it. Now she's able to reflect on all of this and seeing what a marvelous, amazing creation she has made.
What is the idol disfigured spirit?
It's at the bottom of the page.
282.
Because now it's becoming individualized, but this individuality is not a true individuality. It's the ego form. It's a formulation within nature that's mimicking a kind of an individuality. It's not yet the true soul within, the true individual within the being that's becoming conscious, but a surface individuality that is really, it's a part of the mind that perceives itself distinct from other things. So that's why it's a living idol. It's like a doll or a representation of the true self within, the true individual being that we have deep within, which represented by our psychic being. It's not that yet. It's still a surface representation of that. But it's very useful in order to operate this nature and begin to turn it and exert some control over the rest of the nature, over the vital and the physical, this mental individuality, this ego that we identify with as ourself.
Again, the sentiment wondering how sees the great automaton is a key concept to me, because it's also a concept for ourselves, that as soon as we start to wonder, automatically our changes slowly into consciousness. Wonder is often the start of consciousness and individuality.
Yeah, I think it's true that sometimes that may be the start of spirituality when we begin to wonder, who am I? How is it that I'm here in this world? How has this world come to be, to exist like this?
Heart beats and the lungs are breathing, brains are thinking. I mean, it's really, it's the end of the automaton, and suddenly a new dimension starts.
Yeah. Would you like to read?
One more point. This is always touching me in daily life also. The mystery of unseen accurate steps. How in daily life, when one is open and conscious, how can see that they're not thinking, and the mystery, how things happening in everyday life.
Yeah, we're not, we think that we're controlling everything, but actually nature is finding its way and moving things, despite our intentions sometimes.
To be what she was not inflamed her hope. She turned her dream towards some high unknown. A breath was felt below of one supreme. An opening looked up to spheres above. and colored shadows lined on mortal ground. The passing figures of immortal things. A quick celestial flash could sometimes come. The illumined soul fell on heart and flesh, and touched with some semblance of ideal light, the stuff of which our earthly dreams are made.
Thank you. It seems as if this wandering is now developing into a more conscious seeking or aspiration towards the divine or towards the answers to these fundamental questions. But to be what she was not inflamed her hope. She turned her dream towards some high unknown. There is the beginnings of a seeking of a greater life. A breath was felt below of one supreme. There is the feeling of the presence of the divine. An opening looked up to spheres above, and colored shadows limned on mortal ground, the passing figures of immortal things. There is this perhaps opening of vision to the higher realms of existence, and a sense of reflections of those beings and influences here on earth. A quick celestial flash could sometimes come. Perhaps this flash of intuition or vision. The illumined soul ray fell on heart and flesh. When we begin to look up towards the divine, something comes in response, comes down to us. Intuitions, a sense of higher things, in touch with semblances of ideal light, the stuff of which our earthly dreams are made. Limned is outlined or sketched.
It's like an image from Plato's allegory of the cave.
Yes. Ganga Lakshmi. Wait, 1 second.
A fragile human love that could not last. Ego's moth wings to lift the seraph soul. Appear a surface clamor of brief date, extinguished by a scanty breath of time. Joy that forgot mortality for a while. Came a rare visitor who left time and made all things seems beautiful for an hour. Hopes that soon fade to drab realities and passions that crumble to ashes while they blaze, kindle the common earth with their brief flame. A creature insignificant and small, visited and lifted by an unknown power. Man labored on his little patch of earth for means to last, to enjoy, to suffer, and died.
Thank you. I would like to read here Shraddhavan's commentary on this passage, which is quite insightful. She says, I think these are amongst the most beautiful lines in Savitri. A fragile human love that could not last. Our human love is fragile. It easily gets bruised and broken, even destroyed. It is the product of the ego, which is only a specious image of a self and an idol of disfigured spirit. Sri Aurobindo likens our egoistic human love to the delicate wings of a moth, a night butterfly, which get very easily damaged. The love of the ego is fragile like that. But it is really trying to lift up the soul, which is not so weak and easily torn. The soul is not like a moth, but a very powerful angel, a seraph, belonging to the highest of the 9 orders of angels, the divine messengers who bring communications from the Lord into our human world. The seraphs or seraphim are described in the Hebrew Bible as each having 6 powerful wings. But at the early stage of human development, which the poet is describing now, that first fragile human love is weak and could not last for a long time. It is only a surface glamour whose lifespan is brief, so it can easily be extinguished, blown out like a birthday candle by a scanty breath of time. But still, it is something precious and beautiful, a reflection of the ideal light on an illumined soul ray, of an illumined soul ray. The first appearance of love in the physical world. The second sign of the higher light is joy. When we are in a state of pure joy, we forget our mortality. We forget that we have to die. Like love, joy too comes, but very rarely, and leaves quickly and soon, betimes. This is a Shakespearean word meaning quickly or soon. But joy does have the power to make everything seem beautiful for an hour, for a short time. Hope is another of those rare, uplifting, divine visitors. When we have hope, we have courage, we have faith, we can attempt great things. But our earthly hopes soon fade away. They lose their bright strength and fade into drab realities. Drab means colorless, dull, without interest, without charm. Passions, intense feelings, kindle flames of interest and enthusiasm and bright intentions in our common earth. But those fires very quickly burn away to nothing. They are passions that crumble to ashes while they blaze. A blaze is a big, bright, hot fire, but it may soon consume all its fuel and only dusty ashes are left behind. These short-lived semblances of ideal light, kindled by the soul ray, have lighted a fire in our common earth, in the clay of our body. They light us up just for a little while with their brief flame. I'll skip down a little bit. She continues, this refers to the ordinary life of human beings, a creature insignificant and small, but occasionally visited by an unknown power. And when that unknown power comes, we get uplifted. But most of the time we are just here laboring. Laboring in English means working hard, but because it is Sri Aurobindo and because he knew French so well, we hear at the same time the French word laborer, which means to plow. Each of us has a little patch of earth which we have to plow, trying to make something grow. The first thing that the farmer tries to do is to grow food. All the efforts that we make are for means to prolong our life a little bit, to get enjoyment if we can, to achieve something worthwhile if possible. But anyway, lasting also means suffering, and eventually we will die. Our mortality is built in. That is the outer expression. But on the occult plane, on the plane of the Godheads, there is something else. Yeah, this is volume 7 of English of Savitri. Her commentary on. Yeah. Yeah, volume 7. There are books describing the entire length of Savitri, passage by passage, line by line, indicating all the difficult words and images and metaphors.
The complement of Thursday and Sunday for a few years was fantastic. The English and Savitri on this, completely different but so powerful together. Yeah, very grateful to Shraddhavan.
Nandi's referring that Shraddhavan used to have another class parallel to this called the English of Savitri, in which she would concentrate a bit more on the language of the poem, especially for non-native English speakers. And all of the volumes, except for the last, are now published in this series of books.
You can listen.
If I may say so, Larry, my interpretation of this is that this is the Virgin Mary at first, what Christianity calls it. Virgin Mary, the divine incarnated, what Shraddha calls Superman, in its fully completed form of its divinized nature only, in its immortal and limitless and infinite, the ever-existing body upon earth, completely at its supernal state, the Virgin Mary. Either it's feminine, masculine, that's more of a mind creation, man, woman. It's just symbolic. Woman is symbolic for the creator of life. All man, father is woman, I said it backwards. Woman is symbolic for the creator of life. All man is symbolic for the giver of life, mother of life, father of life. So then I go back to this is the Superman or the super person on earth first, which is she. And then as she looks upon everything, she is in her overmind Godhead form, in her overmind Godhead form, and thus allowing. I had the she and the he backwards, or the supernal being and the overmind being. I think I had that backwards. So it's the Virgin Mary there on earth, and seeing all of this as beautiful and created. It's the overmind Godhead. Sorry, I mixed it up. It's still about the person, the being in existence on earth, but more so about an overmind Godhead existence, not of the body's not immortalized. It's just the being that's there in its overmind Godhead of this higher supernal truth, where the overmind Godhead's body can dissolve and wither away. But then here here, like he's a rare visitor. The super person is a rare visitor because he left his free times of his divine kingdom and came down, and they created man, labored from the path. He created man from a supernal higher force of unknowingty into its laborious action for means to last,
Yeah.
which is to eat,
Okay.
build, which is what we know as hierarchy of needs. And even this is not actually a hierarchy of needs of what man terms in psychological nature today, but it is actually an intrinsic way of being to enjoy.
Jay, it's a little bit of a long commentary. I think we can end it with that.
Well, it's long because it's a precise explanation.
But we're running out of time
I
now.
understand, but I mean, some people are open to it, some people are dismissive to it. It's a strike, bro. It's striking me right now rather than just letting me explain.
Well, we're finished for the day. Now we're concluding now, and so I would like to finish.
The reason why it was going on is because it's something simple that I'm precisely explaining. That's all I'm saying. There's many subtopics within this topic.
But I would like to close the discussion now.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, thank you. So we have some little music to finish.
an ocean of electric energy, formlessly formed in strange wave particles, constructing by their dance this solid scheme. Its mightiness in the action shut the rest, thus has been made this real impossible world an obvious miracle or convincing show.
Thanks to Sri Aurobindo.